this little, I don't know, picture on Facebook, and it really just reminded me of how my life is, and so I thought I would put that on my presentation, that what were used to be my secrets is now my story, especially with trauma and abuse. My family dynamics were my parents were divorced when I was 18 months old. My mom remarried when I was 3 and still currently married to my stepdad. I have a brother, Ryan, who's 27, and he lives currently with me. And I have a sister, Kylie, who's 23, who's currently living with me. I'm a little bit crazy right now. And a brother, Joel, who's going to UNK in Kearney, so he's 20 years old. So we're almost all grown. My dad also remarried to my ex-stepmom. She had a daughter from a previous marriage who lives in Lincoln. Her name is Shannon. And then I have a brother that they had together. He's 28. I don't have much contact with him. My dad worked 7 days a week when I was growing up, so I really didn't get to visit him. I also was required because he paid child support. In all reality, I was visiting my stepsister and my stepmom, where I had some abuse, trauma, and sexual abuse and emotional abuse. So it wasn't pleasant for me. I almost got sick to my stomach every weekend I had to go. I also had to go for, I think, 3 weeks in the summer, which was also very traumatizing for me to have to be gone from my home that long. So the only quality time I got with my dad was, I think he picked me up Fridays, the 10 minutes that he picked me up Fridays, and then the 10 minutes when he'd bring me back Sundays. And that's kind of how I determined what I expect out of men now, and what I give myself is, if they show me a little bit of attention, then that must mean that they love me or whatever. My mom worked full-time when I was growing up. I didn't get along with my stepdad from day one. We struggled who got my mom's attention. My mom then had 3 children with him, and by the time Joel came along, she was diagnosed with lupus and was very sick, so I was kind of like an older sister / mom. She was extremely codependent to the point of not knowing how to pump her own gas, and I vowed that I would never be like that and be that dependent upon a man and have to clean the house and have to cook and do all these things before they came home at the end of the day. Just didn't see that as something I wanted to do with my life, and I love my mom to death. I just didn't admire that about her. I started coping when I was young. I was overeating and throwing up at the age of 5. At that point, I didn't really know why. I was very stressed, but I didn't know why. I blocked out a lot of memories of things that were going on. At 13, I started smoking tobacco, just kind of something to break out of the mold and show that I could have some rebellious in me and didn't have to do everything I was supposed to do. 14, I started smoking marijuana, which was before I even drank for the first time, and that was in 8th grade. That was kind of just to see what it was all about. I actually knew how to inhale a cigarette, so I thought I could try to inhale marijuana and see what that was like. That gave me a feeling that I therefore longed until the day I got sober. Marijuana gave me a feeling of I didn't have to stress about life. I didn't have to deal with parents, teachers, feelings, emotions, relationships. It made me numb, and that I could still function to a certain degree. Between 8th and 9th grade was a really hard transition for me, and I think it is for a lot of youth. That's a really hard from middle school to high school. So I just did what everybody else was doing and started some serious binge drinking at that age. 14, I was diagnosed with major depression and was on medication that I took occasionally. I tried to at points in times. But I continued to use drugs, so that counteracted the good I was trying to do with taking medication. At 15 years old, I used all the previous mentioned coping mechanisms, plus I started my long journey with codependent relationships. Those relationships have shown me how dark my depression can possibly be, even until in the last 2 years. The worst I've been in my depression is when I'm in a really toxic, unhealthy relationship, which I can find real easily if anybody's interested in having one. At the age of 14, I lost around 20 to 25 pounds my freshman year. I was terribly depressed, and I didn't know what was wrong. My mom didn't know what was wrong. We just knew that, I wasn't a normal, healthy 14-year-old, which I don't really know what is. But I was in a relationship that sucked everything out of me emotionally. Had a boyfriend at that time that was unhealthy. My mom, I don't know where she was, but she read a pamphlet and discovered what depression really was, and then went through like all the bullet points on it and the side effects, and she was like, whoa, this is totally my daughter. So she showed it to me, and I thought, well, see, you know, it sounds like me, but I don't know why. And so I went to a counselor and got on some more medication, and then continued to smoke marijuana. So that I've tried a lot of medications and they didn't work because I kept smoking marijuana. My coping led to abusing. 18 years old, my senior year, I started doing whatever was available or offered to me. Pot laced with cocaine, opium. My drinking increased that year with senior activities and senioritis. Lots of parties. I grew up in Kearney, so more of a rural area with, at that time, not a lot to do besides drive around drinking and being stupid. Up to this point, I had, followed a curfew. I kind of tried to people please for a while and wanted my parents to be proud of me. And after I started opening up with my drug abuse into different areas, I no longer cared about anything. My inhibitions were completely lowered. At 19 years old was the beginning of the end for me. I was in another extremely toxic relationship and began using meth so I could stay up during his hours and know what he was doing, because he was using meth and I just couldn't keep up if I wasn't doing his schedule. The very first time I did it, I just smoked it because in my head I thought that was the least invasive way to do it, and I would never snort it or inject it or anything of that nature. Within 4 hours, I was on the back of the toilet snorting dope off the top of the toilet, and at that point, I had already passed my limit of what I said I wouldn't do, and that was 4 hours into it. I stayed up for 7 days and didn't eat and didn't sleep. And now, currently, I'm 12 years sober, and I still don't do good if I don't eat and sleep. So I'm not quite sure how I survived many times of not eating and sleeping, plus adding methamphetamines to the situation. But it really was for me, looking back on it, shows my extremely addictive personality. I was so wrapped up in that I had no clue the ride that I was about to jump on. I came across this when I was making this presentation, and it really just something I wanted to share with you guys, the physical terms of methamphetamine stimulants. I just liked what it stood for, so hopefully you guys have that in your packets. Okay, 19 to 20, my morals and standards were extremely lowered. I just didn't have any self-respect, didn't have a lot of respect for anybody else either. My sexual promiscuity, stands for itself with low morals and low standards. I was involved with gang activity, my boyfriends and friends. That was just part of how I was living. That's not how I grew up, but that's part of the life I was choosing to live. Hung out with a lot of felons that were 10, 15 years older than me, because lots of times they knew where the drugs were, and that's, I was 15, 16, and they were 27, 28, looking not to go to prison, and just some bad people. Got into stealing, and then at this point I really experimented with anything. There's only a few drugs I could say that I have never done. My aunt at the time worked at Kearney Clinic, and so I would go there when I was really sick, because the methamphetamines really lowers your immune system, so I would get sick a lot. So I went there planning on getting some cough syrup. Excuse me. And I went into the room to see the doctor, and he was just real casual about it and said, there are some family members that are concerned, and his nurse was my aunt, that are concerned about your health, your physical health, and your mental health and your substance abuse. And I just kind of played it off like, okay, they give me my medicine. And then some of my family members started coming. They were in all different waiting rooms in the whole lobby, like craziness. So they started coming in saying, well, here's your options. You can go to Richard Young, or you can go to treatment. And I was like, well, I don't have a drug problem, so I guess I'll go to Richard Young. And they took me straight to the hospital. so they could test me to see what kind of drugs I'd been doing. I remember when I got there, I had drugs in my pocket, and I knew I needed to get rid of that before I got some charges or something, so I flushed that down the toilet, which for a drug addict was very hard to do. I was then admitted to the hospital, and I don't even know, I was sleep deprived and, on drugs, and I don't even really know what happened. All I remember is being in this room, and they said, this is where your options are, where you have to go. So I did decide to go to Richard Young. I was there probably 3 or 4 days before I actually knew that I admitted myself. I was an adult. But they had sedated me to a point of I didn't know how I really got there. So once I figured out that I admitted myself, I went ahead and checked myself right out of that. Some important players during this, I did have some support systems at this time, and I kind of wanted to share that because I know a lot of people in here are in the school systems. My guidance counselor in high school, one of the questions he would always ask me is why do you want to beat yourself up when you should wanting to beat others up? But I had such low self-esteem, therefore my depression was I just was so angry, but I always took it out on myself. At this point, still wasn't aware of a lot of the trauma that had happened to me as a kid. I just didn't know why I felt the way I felt. So that's why I did all the drugs I wanted to do, because I wanted to change that feeling, and I wasn't sure how else to do it. I also saw a counselor off and on through high school, and he really gave me a lot with codependency and my substance abuse. He would just let me talk to him and be honest, and I didn't have any fear of that going back to my mom. And I don't really know how that works now with what you have to report and not report to parents. But that was something for me that meant a lot at this age. And so I hope that, I don't know if you have any questions for me about where I was at this age and how you could help others, you can talk to me afterwards. I'll be here. My high school teacher, she was always there to listen to me, and I acted out a lot, and she didn't judge any of those behaviors, and she just accepted me for who I was, and that meant a lot to me. So those were 3 people that I could think of that really stood out to me, that were positive influences for me at that time. I started outpatient when I left Richard Young. That was one of the agreements upon leaving there. That was, I think, 2 or 3 days a week for a couple hours, and that just didn't work for me. Not a 19-year-old meth addict. It was too not structured enough. I couldn't even stay sober most of the times to go, or if I did, I would pass out while I was there. So that didn't work for me, and I wasn't ready to quit. I didn't even realize I had an addiction at that time, and if I did realize I didn't care, I wasn't ready to quit. My bottom for me was one time I went home to my parents' house. I had my own apartment, but I went home to my parents' house and the locks were changed. And that was one of the biggest eye-openers for me, was like, holy cow, what is happening? I couldn't hold a job. I just couldn't, my life was way too chaotic and drama-filled to go to work every day and try to have any consistency. I almost lost my apartment and my car before I went to treatment. My grandpa paid both of those before I went to treatment, so I would go. I had no regard for my physical or my mental health. They were not good at all at this time. I had a lot of suicidal ideations. Every single time I came down off methamphetamines, which was several times per month, I was very suicidal. And that was just how strong my addiction was for me, was that I didn't enjoy any of it. I just kept on doing it because it was just such a strong physical and mental addiction. It wasn't like pot for me. I loved smoking pot, and that was a different type of situation. When I went to treatment at Grand Island St. Francis, I had to do a substance abuse history and timeline, and my grandparents were there for like a family day thing, and my grandpa asked, well, why did she do so many different kinds of drugs? Why didn't she just, drink alcohol or something? So the people in my group, we all lined up like on a stage like this, and then my counselor put out things, these are all different drugs you can do. Everybody go through and pick your drug of choice. By the time it got to me, my drug of choice was already taken, so I picked my next drug of choice. So we just went down the line, and it really gave a big understanding to our families who didn't know why would you do something weird like acid or something? But my drugs of choice were meth, marijuana, and alcohol in that order. I didn't drink very much. I only drank when I couldn't find the other kind of drugs. They each gave me a different fix for the feelings I was having. The worst part for me of treatment was doing the family groups. Alcoholism and mental health to me is a family illness. So I wasn't the only one who was sick in this situation. I was just the only one that was admitting it at the time. Well, I had to write feelings letters to all my siblings, and I had put them through a lot of situations that I was really ashamed of. I had to write feelings letters to them, to my boyfriend, to my parents, and I was full of immense amount of anger. And in my house, it just wasn't appropriate for females to show anger. It was okay for men to act like jerks, but it just wasn't appropriate for females to act that way. So I kept a lot of that inside, which is one reason I think I continued to mask those feelings, because I didn't know what to do with them. Whew, sorry. And then I kind of realized that a lot of the anger I had, didn't really realize this till recently, was mostly towards my mom for not protecting me as a kid like I thought she should. Through a lot of my abuse, I think you just think your mom should be that protector, especially because I lived with primarily my mom and not my dad. So he wasn't my protector like dads are for most children. It was my mom who I counted on for that. This is what we used in treatment, and I don't know how familiar you guys are with this chart, but it has a lot of good and bad memories for me, so I just wanted to share it with you. Every day we had to pick out, like three of these feelings and journal about it. So I like that. I did aftercare when I got out of St. Francis. I think I was 20 still. And I went every week, and I met a lot. I was one of the two females in a group of 20, and I was 19, so I got lots of attention at this time. I met a lot of really bad guys in treatment that I don't know. So anyway, I just stayed sober for periods of time, not more than 60 days ever. One of the main reasons I went to treatment is because I saw a brochure on St. Francis saying codependency treatment, and I'm like, okay, that's what I need. But that wasn't it. That was a different kind of treatment. And so after I completed inpatient drug and alcohol treatment, I went to codependency treatment, which was 6 weeks long. I think it was 3 nights a week, and I drove from Kearney to Grand Island to do that. I was really dedicated to that because I knew that was a huge problem for me. And I had started reading codependency books before I even got sober because I knew that was my core issue. I still struggle with codependency. I've really gained a lot of strength in friendships, but relationship-wise, it's still a struggle for me, but I do continue to work on it because I know that I will find a healthy person for me as a partner when I'm more healthy for myself. Then I went to a halfway house because I couldn't gain more than 60 days of sobriety on my own. And it was suggested I go to a halfway house, and that was just kind of beyond my comprehension. It was in a different town. I had never been out of Kearney before, lived out of Kearney before. So I put my name on a waiting list, and it was like a long waiting list, like 60 people, I think. And within 2 weeks, they called and said, we went through everybody on this list, and you're the next one. And I said, well, can I call you back? They said, no, you got to tell me right now. So I just said I would go. I really was mortified, and I was so scared. I don't really have this in very good order, but I was hospitalized while I was there we had big groups 2 or 3 times a week, and I was in that group, and somebody was talking about their sexual abuse trauma as a child, and all of a sudden, like a floodgate opened. I just had all my memories come to me, and it was so traumatizing. I needed to go to the hospital. I was having suicidal ideations. I didn't know what to do with all that. I literally vomited it just came up out of me. It was been stuffed for so many years. That was really scary for me. Once I started looking back at my behaviors and feelings, everything really made sense to me of why, from a certain age of 5, I would act the way I've acted. I wouldn't sleep for days at a time because I would have terrible flashbacks. So I would just stay up, and therefore it was hard to keep a job at that point in time in my life as well. Memories have came back slowly over the years. It's been 12 years now, and I kind of describe them to people as a slideshow. There isn't sounds or emotions or smells or anything like that that goes with them, and everybody remembers their trauma differently. Not everybody, you remember it all at one time, and you remember everything about it and how it felt and all that stuff. So I read a book called Courage to Change when I was at the halfway house that really made me think that I wasn't crazy, because sometimes I've been told, and my other friends were told, if you don't remember all this, and it didn't happen. And so I was really not sure of myself, and I needed to know that what was happening to me I wasn't the first person that happened to. That book really did a lot for me, and there was also a workbook. I think there was like 400, 500 pages, and I went through it all for it to really make sense to me and me to be okay with myself with it. And it helped, but to this day I'm not okay with it. Okay. My counselor that I had at the Bridge she was fairly new there, and she's still there now. She's the executive director. She was my guardian angel at the time. I didn't have my car because I couldn't afford insurance on it. We were required to work 40 hours a week, and we were also required to do 30 hours of therapy a week. It was the most exhausting thing I've ever done in my life. I lived with 9 women for 9 months, and most of us were meth addicts. And I don't know if you guys know any meth addicts, but that was hell on earth. This is kind of funny. I would pray when we got somebody new who came in. I would say, please be an alcoholic, please be an alcoholic. Because those DTs get over a lot faster. Meth stays in your system for like up to 18 months. So it was sad because I was really wanted them to have a different drug of choice, because meth stays in your system forever, therefore you still act crazy even though you're sober. So, and I didn't have the same group of women that, I went in with. People would relapse, they get kicked out. It was very hard to graduate from there. You couldn't have any male contact, and most young drug addicts have codependency issues, so not having contact with any males for 9 months was, for me, probably the hardest part. Getting off drugs wasn't as hard as that was. There was 3 of us who made it through all the way together, and we are still really good friends today, and we all work in the recovery field of helping others. I was kind of humbled. I had to ride my bike for transportation because I couldn't afford to drive my car, and that was another God thing, because if I would have had my car, I would have been out of there a lot of times. But since I was in Hastings without a vehicle, I ended up staying there more times than I wanted to. We weren't allowed to have any cell phones. The phone we used was in the middle of the house, so everybody could hear everything. There was just no secrets, and that's how it worked. I celebrated my 21st birthday at a halfway house, so that's not something everybody can say. So I stayed sober, and we had a fun party, and I was much younger than most of the women there, but I did my growing up there, and I did my growing up in the AA and NA world too. My very first AA meeting was after treatment in Kearney, and I was so raw after leaving treatment. I was scared to death leaving treatment, because that's very familiar. You're scheduled from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. of what you're doing. When you left treatment, you're on your own. You're on your own for stability, and I definitely didn't have any of that. So I went to a meeting, and I just talked about how scared I was, and I met my sponsor, one of my best friends at that meeting. She was almost 20 years older than me, but she had some of the exact same similar issues that I went through, and we talked a lot. And at this point in time, I was raised in church and was baptized and confirmed and all that, but I just lost contact with God completely. She's very spiritual. She's a spiritual counselor, or a Christian counselor in Kearney, and she said, "You can borrow my God till you have your own." And I did that for a long time. Sorry. The 2 primary things that connected us were our childhood sexual abuse and our severe codependency issues. I just want to stress to everybody at this time who knows anybody in AA or NA, or suggests that for anybody, that once you get clean, you don't just stop. you keep going to meetings because you're still sick and you'll never completely be better. I'm sorry, I didn't plan on this. They suggest in treatment to do 90 meetings in 90 days. Kind of just really pound that in your system, create new habits. And I didn't have a job. I was waiting to go to the halfway house. So I did over 180 meetings in 90 days. I kind of just lived at the AA clubhouse. And I did what they call service work, and I would help make coffee and set the tables and clean up the place and really get involved in what was helping me. And I had the honor and privilege to meet some of the old farts who started AA in Kearney, who've passed away now, but they meant the world to me. And I didn't get sober with a bunch of teenage, junkies. I got sober with some old, hardcore alcoholics, and they really taught me some things that I continue to teach people that I work with, because they just lived in a different world. It wasn't the same. So that really meant a lot to me that I had those relationships, and it was really hard for me when they passed away. Two of them, their names were Bill, and one was in Kearney and one was in Grand Island, and they had over 30 years sober when they died. This is what we say at the beginning of every AA meeting, the Serenity Prayer, and I said this about 95 times before I got up here today. It's just a simple thing that means a lot and can do a lot in certain situations. And then you say the Lord's Prayer at the end of every AA and NA meeting, kind of bringing everybody in back to the place of where we started from. I had moved to Grand Island. I wanted to work at St. Francis, which was a teenage recovery place, and you had to have a year sober before you could work there. So I worked in a daycare and about drove myself crazy till I had a year sober, and then I started working there. So that's why I moved to Grand Island, because I wanted to work there. They closed, and therefore I went into a really deep depression because I had no separation between my life and my job. My job was my life. So when they closed, I had an option of coming to Lincoln at that time, which was probably 2003-ish. And I wasn't ready to do that, so I just I've worked in jails, and I worked at detox, and I've worked at other group homes. That's kind of what I did in Grand Island. I ended up having to get on disability. I just wasn't able to maintain attendance for a job. I really struggled. My post-traumatic stress disorder for these 7 to 10 years was so strong. I laid in bed for a couple of years, like literally, didn't do a whole lot. I did still go to AA and NA and talk to my friends. I attempted college 3 different times, and I'm almost done, but it's taken me a long time. I saw different counselors at that time, different professionals for different reasons, and did some different EMDR and different things to deal with PTSD, and I came a long way, just not far enough to where I needed to be. Everybody wanted me to move. I was stuck. I was completely stuck where I was at, and I didn't know what to do to make it any different. People gave me suggestions, but it just didn't feel right. So I had 2 nieces born in 1 year, and once I met them, that sparked something inside of me that had never been lit before. I don't have any kids. And they were both in this end of the state, and I had some really good friends of mine moved to Omaha that I hung out with a lot in Grand Island, that we were in recovery together. And one of them I was at the halfway house with, so we'd known each other for 12 years. And I decided I'd come stay with my best friend in Lincoln for a month or so just to see what it was like. And I applied for some jobs, and I got a job at Touchstone in Lincoln. Oh, I forgot. This is one of my nieces, Cara Lee. She's 2.5. I saw her yesterday. She wore me out. That's Bella. She's 1.5 years. And she has my phone going crazy. They both know how to work my phone better than me. They're funny. So then I moved to Lincoln, and I got a job at a treatment center, which was very hard. Harder than, there was way more drama there than I remember when I was in treatment, but I probably caused a lot of that drama. it was really hard because you had to be a medium between doing what the counselor said was best for the client and doing what the counselor says, the client wanted to meet their needs as well. It was a much harder job than I anticipated it to be. I was offered while I worked there to take a peer support training, and so I took a week off work unpaid to go take this training because everybody said you'll be perfect at it. It's totally for you, and so I tried it. One of my best friends was one of the trainers. So I went to Grand Island for a week, and I learned so much I have a huge book about it, but I learned so much about people and how to look at everybody with a holistic perspective and not just purely mental health or purely juvenile justice. So that really helped me a lot in my personal life and helping others, my friends and people I worked with in all areas. I had heard about a peer support position at Magellan. So I applied for that, and I don't know. Anyway, it took 5 months before I got hired. I applied, and it was for a new program that hadn't been started yet. So I kept working at Touchstone and kept calling my boss every month or so and saying, hey, and you got any progress on that situation yet? And so I really stuck that out and eventually got hired. I work with youth with a My Life program, which I'm going to share about here in a minute. I've had several years of previous experience working with youth, so like I said, at the group homes primarily. I worked at a boys group home and at a girls group home. Boys are much easier to work with. Girls have a lot of hormone problems, and it's just different. So also part of my job with Magellan is being a peer support specialist, and I help people who navigate through the system and give them some resources that maybe are out in their individual communities that they aren't aware of or don't have access to. I also run a program called My Life, which is a youth leadership group for youth ages 13 to 23 who have issues with substance abuse, mental health, foster care, or juvenile justice related issues. So My Life is Magellan Youth Leaders Inspiring Future Empowerment, and it started in Arizona in 2008 to help get some youth voices on why and how their system was working, especially in foster care. There's a lack of youth voices in the system, programs for youth and young adults. And the lack of opportunities, I'm sure everybody's heard several times that there's nothing to do, all we can do is drink and do drugs and go party, there's nothing else to do. So this is a program that offers them something to do, at least once a month, if not twice a month, to develop leadership skills, social skills, and positive social supports. There's a huge stigma around mental health and substance abuse, but my personal experience is that there's a bigger stigma around foster care and juvenile justice related cases too. And also, it doesn't just have to stick to those 4 categories. People can come if they have like teen pregnancy issues, or if their parent has substance abuse issues. It doesn't have to necessarily be them that has it. It's just anybody who struggles with that in their personal life. We also provide education and outreach for other families and professionals in the community, and collaborate with a lot of different agencies. So it has to be a group effort for this to pull off. And I have some community partners in this room, and they really work well, and we have a good program together. This is basically what I just told you. It was established in Arizona in 2008, and My Life now has, I don't know how many, I think 8 different groups going in Nebraska, or going nationwide, sorry. And these are some of the signs that they make at the meetings that we hold up, and that they have called a My Fest, and the youth plan it all. Magellan supports it, other community agencies help, but the youth plan their events and plan what they want to talk about. So when we have monthly meetings, it's about what they want to do and how they feel and what they need to talk about. This was a picture of when it started in Arizona in April and how it looks currently and how many members they've gained. And this is very similar to what our first meeting looked like in Omaha. And this was very similar to what our second meeting looked like in Omaha. Our first meeting in Omaha, I think we had 12, and our second meeting we had 53 sign in. So that was pretty big. This was our first meeting in Omaha. There's Laura and Chris in the back. So that was pretty small. And the next one we don't even have pictures for because it was so chaotic. This was our kickoff event we had in November, where we had invited a lot of agencies and had a lot of youth come and just learn more about it. And so these were some pictures we had it at the Casa Douglas County building, which was really nice. These are some of the pictures where we had different fun things on the tables, and we played some go-get-'em activities and got the youth up and involved. These are the different groups we have nationwide. Like I said, ours in Nebraska started in 2013 with the kickoff, and then in January we started monthly meetings in Kearney and in Omaha. So I live in Lincoln, and more than once a month I go to Kearney for meetings, and I go to meetings in Omaha almost weekly as well. So I kind of live in my car a little bit. And then my supervisor from Arizona, he's gotten all the rest of these started. He actually started it in 2008 to help the youth he worked with, and now I don't know how many hundreds he's worked with. They also have a festival which we'll do in Nebraska. Excuse me. It's a free community event produced by members of my life to raise awareness about mental health, substance abuse, foster care, and juvenile justice related issues. This year they did like a graffiti contest. They had the skateboarders. They had people get up there and rap and sing and dance and read poetry. And all these youth are extremely talented. So they did it all. And we hope to do that in Nebraska. My boss came last month and he said, well, does it really get really hot here in the summer? I said, yeah, and humid. So maybe we should do this around September, I suggested. It also takes a lot of planning. Here's the My Fest they've had in Arizona. They just had one 2 weeks ago Sunday, and they had over 10,000 in attendance at that festival. So I'm super excited to get this started in Nebraska, and anybody who's interested or has any resources, please let me know. They also do a day at the Capitol, and we'll do that here too. And there's some other agencies who do some things similar to a day at the Capitol, but the youth get to go, and we talk about some issues that they have prior to going to the Capitol, and then we give them education and awareness on what's going on in their government and legislature, and then they actually got to go, and we schedule it where they can meet face-to-face with their legislature and their senators to talk about their concerns. And there's been some really huge changes in Arizona from them talking to the governor about how they feel about things. So that's really exciting that we're going to be able to give youth that empowerment, that they know that their voice is important, that it actually can be heard. This is Pennsylvania's Youth Day at the Capitol. More than anything, it brings awareness to a lot of people in the community that weren't aware of some of the things that go on. This is different presentations they've done that people ask my life to come present at a certain function, a school function or juvenile justice conference or things like that. So hopefully here in the next year, I've actually had a congressman ask me to bring some youth to speak to him. So I've already had some invitations to do some things of that nature. This is just more of those meetings and conferences, and that's just a huge opportunity that these youth would never have without having a support group. My life in the media, when we have My Fest, it'll be on the TV, it'll be on the radio, it'll be on the news. Greg in Arizona, my supervisor there, he produces all these videos, and we have tons of YouTube videos, and we have a really active Facebook page too that we use. So if you guys are interested or have anybody that's interested, I can give you an email with all of our YouTube video. I don't know if anybody uses YouTube, but they have a lot of really cool videos, and you can get the youth more engaged with videos than you can with just talking. They also did a My Prom, because a lot of these youth don't get to go to prom or homecoming because they've been, in detention centers or just couldn't afford it. So Arizona did a My Prom, and I'm really hoping we can do that in Nebraska too. It really shows them that they're important and that they can be a part of things and be integrated back into the system. Does anybody have any questions for me?
Amy, do you have any plans on doing a group in Lincoln?
We're working on the funding for that. But yes, I have a lot of people waiting in line for a group to start in Lincoln. So we do have some people that travel from Lincoln to Omaha because it's not that far for a meeting. We serve free pizza at every meeting, and we play fun games. So so far we're having a really good time, and we've got some things going on with Children's Mental Health Awareness Month in May. We're doing a huge things across the state from Scottsbluff to Omaha. So if anybody's interested in any of that, we need help getting those things going. Yes?
How do young people become involved in my life? Is it a service provider?
I've tried to do as much outreach. I just started in August, and I try to do as much outreach as I can. I think this is a statewide conference, so a lot of you I don't know. But I can give flyers and this kind of information out, or can give presentations to schools and different programs. So that's kind of how they get involved, is by people who work with them. Magellan sends it out in their newsletters and things like that. So a lot of kids that are on Medicaid, their parents are aware of it, or that are in foster homes.
But a young person could just contact you?
Yeah, or just come. There's no referral process, or it's just really laid back. And if they don't have to tell me why they're there, they can just come and check it out and see if they want to be involved. I don't ask why they're there or what's going on with them unless they want to share that. So.
What is a typical meeting like besides the pizza?
We start out with the pizza. That gets everybody interested. Then we do some icebreaker, get to know you kind of games. And since we just started in January, we're still in the kind of the beginning phases of that. So I do have a lot of books where we figure out games, and they get up. We like to do some activities they get to know you that they write with, and then get them up and moving. They really get engaged with each other and realize the more things they have in common when they do that, rather than, I don't know, we're not the same color or nationality, so you don't understand my life kind of thing. So we do that, and then talk about what they want to do the next meeting, and if there's some speakers they want to have come in and what topics they're interested in learning more about. Kind of the stage that we're at right now. Yeah, the main thing that helped me when I was going through middle school and high school, not necessarily middle school, but high school, was just having people who didn't judge me. That I could say, hey, I'm smoking pot, and then I go, oh my God, I gotta call your mom, or something, you know. Just having them be there for me and listen to me was really helpful. Of course, they encouraged me not to do that and to do healthier things. But to have somebody who didn't look down on you for how you're coping was really helpful for me. I don't know if that's typical or not, but that's what helped me. Also having teachers who would ask you to stay after class and ask you, hey, what's really going on? I know you're acting out, but I know you're not, being mean, because that's how you really feel. Like, I wear my feelings on my sleeve, so it's totally obvious that if I have something going on and I'm acting out in a different manner. So to take time to do the one-on-ones, if you guys have time to do that and recognize that in kids, I would think that's really important. Sorry?
So most kids, do kids go that don't want to be there?
Yes, it's voluntary, completely voluntary. I don't want kids there who acting out really bad and don't want to be there. But yeah, there's kids there that their parents are sitting in the back, or their staff from RTC is sitting in the back, and but it works. I think hygiene is one thing that if you don't keep up on your hygiene, you try to push people away from you and put a guard up, like a physical guard, people don't get close to you. If you smell, or, I think that's a huge thing that I've learned. I didn't have that, but I've learned that since I've, been working with it. And also, I self-medicated with food until I found something different. That may be an indicator. With my mom, I didn't really realize there were so many boundary issues that were so inappropriate until I moved out, until I was 19 years old and moved out of the house. So there's a lot of things that in my personal family could have been recognized had anybody known any different. With my mom, I mean, I told her, and she didn't believe me, so I guess that's that.
Amy, don't you think people know that anyway if they're using?
Well, yeah, and one of the huge things for me is maturity-wise. I mean, I have some friends that have relapsed since I've known them, and they're 45 years old and they still act like they're 17 because they started using drugs when they were 13 and barely have a couple years sober. So maturity-wise, I'm probably younger than I am, even though I've been sober 12 years. I believe, and I was taught, you stop maturing when you start using drugs. And I think it makes total sense. I don't know if youth believe it or not, but that makes sense to me. And I tell that to the youth that I work with.
Well, and since you address mental health also, there's a number of diagnoses, if you will, in which kids will use alcohol, drugs, whatever.
Just to fit in and make things feel different, yeah. So I would always say, not always, I would say 90% chance of the time when somebody's using drugs or alcohol as a youth, they're trying to cope with something they don't know how to cope with in a healthy manner. Which is why my life works good, because it's a bunch of youth that are going through similar things, and it's not a 40-year-old trying to talk to a 16-year-old about what they went through 25 years ago. So, and I'm a lot older than I used to be, but I can still relate to some of the younger kids.
We haven't talked about cutting. Kids use that for coping.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I did that for a period of time. Yeah, I did that for about my freshman year. I just acted out in every way possible. I didn't really know what else to do. I mean, just random things come to you. None of my friends cut it. We're cutting. Just something that, like, I have quite a few tattoos, and that takes away, the physical pain takes away emotional pain. I don't know how many of you understand that, but so I've even done that in sobriety. I've gotten tattoos for dealing with emotional things, whether that's good, wrong, right, wrong, or indifferent. That's kind of how the cutting works. And I've had a friend that did like bloodletting, where she would just take blood from herself, and somehow it gave her a rush, or it gave her what she was looking for. And she also did burns with cigarette lighters, and she has severe scars to this day. So there's a lot of hurt and pain going underneath those behaviors. Yeah. Definitely sooner, because other people are having that going on too. And then when you come to my life, there's some people who are still trying to get off drugs. There's other people who've been sober for a year. There's some people who are in school, some people who've dropped out. So you can learn from every area of, people say, well, I don't know if they're doing good enough to come to my life. Well, you can still learn, just like in AA, you can learn from the person who comes in drunk just as much as you can learn from the person who's been there for 30 years. So I think no matter where they're at between the ages of 13 and 23, it's good for them to come and see that they're not alone. But definitely would have realized that sooner had I known somebody else was struggling that I could have related to, and then figured out what was going on with me. Anybody else? Well, thank you so much for letting me share.